Councillor Hawkins, we're live on YouTube.
Thank you. Good evening, members. Good evening, members of the public if you've joined. Good evening, officers. Welcome to the Planning Applications Committee, 12th of November. Firstly, can we have apologies?
Thank you, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Robin Perry. Councillor Paul Deach is substituting.
Thank you very much, Councillor Deach. Again, are you in agreement that I sign the minutes of the last meeting? Thank you. Actually, where's Cliff? Cliff's not there.
Yeah, he's there.
Oh, there he is, yes. It's when people move around, it makes it. Thanks very much. Declarations we will deal with on each item, which takes us through to item 1 on page 9, Wyvern Lodge bag shot. Declarations, I think we've all received correspondence in respect of this item. Councillor White.
I've had conversations with the applicant and the neighbour in the past, but not recently.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
I've had conversations with the one of the neighbours.
Thank you. Anybody else? No. Mr. Kalan, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. First of all, please note the update summarises the additional objection and the officer response. If we have the first slide up, please. Thank you. Just the next one, please. Location plan. You have 2-storey detached house on the southern side of Duke's Covert, residential cul-de-sac in the green belt of the northern side of the A322 Bracknell Road in Bagshot. The next slide, please. You see the frontage of the site along the cul-de-sac. It is fairly well screened, as you can see, with the ground level declining towards the house, front parking area, and the swimming pool building to the side and the rear. The next slide, please. This is the site plan showing the swimming pool outbuilding that was granted a lawful development certificate. The differences between this and the pool building as built are outlined in section 4, page 11 of the report. This includes additional footprint to the north, wrapping along the side boundary of the application dwelling. So next slide, please. You have the certificate approved plans of the swimming pool building. This included one shared changing area adjacent the entrance towards the bottom of the slide there. And the rear elevation also at the bottom includes a pre-existing garden retaining wall. So the next slide, please, shows the submitted plans for the swimming pool as built. I will show photos in later slides. So the additional footprint, as already outlined, forms the narrower section here, wrapping around the side of the main house, with the front entrance parallel with the front of the main house. This provides 2 male and female changing room facilities used as part of the swimming lessons. So next slide, please. We have the proposed infill extension elevations outlined in yellow, shown on a front elevation section and then on a side elevation section. This is to provide a covered entry and exit system and to adjoin the main house. So if you move on, please, just see some photos. So you see the existing front elevation of the pool building and the side of the main house. And also the other photo, you can see it in the corner towards the rear. This building is not widely visible from the cul-de-sac, and the proposed extension would infill the gap between the pool and the main dwelling. So the next slide, please. Some further photos of the building projecting to the rear. This does have a greater footprint than the certificate building, but has a lower ridge height. Section 7.6, page 15 of the committee report, sets out the very special circumstances which are considered against the harm to the greenbelt arising from the additional footprint and an unfettered commercial use. So final set of photos, please. We have the parking area within the site to the front. So section 7.5 of the report, along with the updates, outline that the parking is considered sufficient to avoid adverse impact on the highway. This is subject to condition 5, limiting the hours of use, the number of sessions per day, and the number of users per session. So the final slide, please. We have here the elevations of the extensions that were also granted the certificate. The case for very special circumstances includes these unimplemented extensions, as the volume, and in particularly the two-story rear gable ends at the bottom and hatched green on the roof plan would have a similar volume if built to that of the existing building and the proposed infill extension. Condition 6 is therefore proposed to remove permitted development rights for any future extensions or outbuildings, including these lawful extensions. So please now move back one slide, please. Just to conclude that the case in favour outlines that there does seem to be a strong demand in the area for swim lessons, and the NPPF also supports planning decisions that enable and support healthy lifestyles. The proposed condition 5, limiting hours of use, sessions per day, and number of attendees, would limit the intensity of such use in the greenbelt. It is therefore considered that subject to these conditions, as outlined in the report, very special circumstances exist to clearly outweigh the harm to the greenbelt. The application is therefore recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members. Councillor Deach.
Thank you, Chairman, and forgive me because I had the short notice of subbing this evening. I had to basically skim read the reports. I mean, this to me looks like a residential property which has been converted into some form of business. I may have that wrong. I'm looking really at one of the things that I get the most complaints about from residents, and although this is not in my ward, is the parking issues that may be associated with this development. And I'm all for residents trying to better their lives and build a business for themselves. But it does appear to me that this business is not the most appropriate place, I would suggest, in a residential area like that. And looking at the hours of operation is going to coincide with neighbours and the families coming home from school and so on and so forth. I understand the officer's recommendation, but yeah, I'd be very interested to see what other members have to say about this, particularly the ward members. But yeah, it does seem slightly inappropriate to my mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
In answer to Councillor Deach, there is already a business of a similar. There is already a swimming business exactly opposite this business already on Duke's Covert.
Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. It always scares me when I agree with Councillor Deach. But actually, having done some research around this, the officer has written to Highways and outlined the fact that there would be 9 lessons per day with a maximum of 5 users per lesson. Having looked on one of the swimming companies that use this, the hours are limited from 8 o'clock till 6 o'clock Monday to Friday, but they are advertising classes to start, from 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock Monday to Friday, but the company that use it are advertising classes to start at 6 o'clock. So whether they've changed their minds since the application, or whether they're intending to cause an enforcement issue, isn't 100% clear, but there's certainly a lack of continuity, if you like, between our letter to Highways and the current operational proceedings, as I said, of just one of the companies that are using Wyvern Lodge. And in addition to that, the lessons are half an hour apart. So people will, and they start half an hour apart. So people will be arriving, having their swimming lesson, leaving. At the moment, they're not changing on site because of COVID. So my understanding is that they sort of come swim ready and leave swim ready, but you can't take a small child out into a car, particularly at this time of year, without drying them, I would suggest, and dressing them. And these are babies' lessons. So there is a paraphernalia that goes with babies. So the fact that, again, in the officer's report to Highways, which has prompted Highways' response, we say that there's 10 parking spaces and 10 parking spaces have been observed, and that should be enough. You're going to have at least 10 people coinciding in the driveway at the same time for people to come in to start a lesson, and those people not yet having left the lesson, given that we're only limiting it to 5 at the moment. And then in addition to that, you've got the residents of the property and the people that are giving the lessons as well. So a lot of those car parking spaces will already being used for that purpose. So I'm not sure whether the information that we've received from the applicant isn't reflected in what they are currently advertising in terms of lessons that have gone in there. But I think, unfortunately, having acted on the information that we've received from the applicant, the information that has gone to Highways isn't consistent with their current operational proceedings, and they are up to date. They're on the website right now. So for that reason, and because I think enforcement in this area is difficult enough anyway, I can't condone it or support it, because I think Highways have been given information which is not consistent with the information that is available about the people's trading practice. It is I drove around there and had a look. It's quite narrow. There's not a huge amount of parking. And I think somebody mentioned earlier that there is a neighbouring business that runs a similar activity. So if all of this coincides together, we've got something of a perfect storm.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chair. So, firstly, I've had a look at a couple of the business online websites. I understand that the application site in itself doesn't have a website. It's more sole traders, if you will, that I believe operate from a couple of different sites. So I've never seen the application site in itself, only just advertise hours beyond what's stated in the report from this. So turning to the parking issue, when I visited the site, it was during a changeover between lessons, and I noted up to 10 cars parked, but there were, as shown on the photos, some parking spaces left. I also observed one vehicle reverse and leaving forward gear, and also observed one car in the corner owned by the person undertaking the lessons, so that there is a system to kind of to double park the operator car and the owner car, and there appears to be an actual total provision of 15 spaces. I have checked that against the dimensions of the site in front of the house, and that appears to be achievable, bearing in mind the recommended 6 metre distance that highways require for a vehicle to reverse and then exit in fourth gear. So whilst the report and the comments to highways reference 10 parking spaces, from what I observed during the site visit, I think there is capacity for some more in practice, and that could still be done safely. So I think that answers the queries, hopefully. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Wheeler.
Sorry, if I can just come back, they are advertising classes starting at 6 o'clock. And so therefore, you know, going back to residential amenity, the operating hours are meant to be up until 6 o'clock. And this is just one of the operators that comes out of Wyvern Lodge. You only have to sort of Google Wyvern and swimming, and up it comes. So this is just one of the organisations, and they've got classes starting at 6 o'clock, not finishing by 6 o'clock. So there's residential amenity reasons, I think, for objecting to it as well.
I think the conditions set out in the report are quite clear. And as members know, we can only look at what we have here and not what is posted elsewhere. And if there if there are instances where hours are being not abided by, when I get it right, enforcement can take place. And I'm sure that residents will be keeping a very close eye on the hours of use. But I come back to the fact that we can only look at what is in front of us and not what is advertised on other media. Any other comments, members? Yes, Councillor White.
A good while ago now, I actually, because there was discussions going on between the neighbours regarding parking, I decided to go up there one afternoon and park up the road and just watch what the situation was. And it seemed to look quite regimented. One lady did park out on the road, and she was told immediately that she had to park on site, to which she did. And it looked quite regimented. It looked okay to me.
Thank you. I'm aware of the history of this site. Any other comments, members? If not, we have an officer recommendation set out. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that recommendation? Pardon me. Councillor Betton, Councillor Rise, and Mr. Scott will do his usual magic with the names. Thank you. Welcome, Madam Mayor.
So your voting members on the officer recommendation to grant subject to conditions. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Against.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
In favour.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
In favour.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
In favour.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
In favour.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
In favour.
Councillor David Lewis.
In favour.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
In favour.
Councillor Darrell Ratteram.
In favour.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
In favour.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Against?
Councillor Helen Whitcroft. I think I'm taking that as in favour. And Councillor Valerie White.
In favour.
Perfect. 13-2.
Thank you, members. That is agreed, 13 votes to 2. Now on to second item. In fact, what we will do on this one, the officer will run through firstly the first item and also touch on the second item, although when it comes to final deliberation, we will deal with these as separate items. Are there any declarations to make on this item? Sorry, I keep forgetting for that. Councillor White.
I did visit the site, but it was a couple of years ago before this actual planning application had been put in.
Thank you. If no others, thank you. Ms. Turiso, please.
Thank you, Chair. Slide, please. Good evening, members. Items 5 and 6 of this agenda refer to the planning applications at Queen Anne House. Only the planning application has been called in. However, for completeness, the listed building consent is also being presented at this meeting. I would direct members to the updates in respect of these items. The planning applications at Queen Anne House seek to develop the plot for residential use. The application site, which you can see on your left-hand side, is outlined in red and is located in Backshot, and it's bordered by Station Road to the north and Bridge Road to the west. The surrounding development has a mixed use and comprises offices, residential and retail units. The application site does fall outside the conservation area. The proposal comprises converting the Grade 2 listed building from offices to 5 flats, and also to construct 4 dwellings on site, which you can see on the block plan on the right-hand side. These would comprise 1 detached dwelling, which is one to the south of Queen Anne House, and then a pair of semi-detached properties and 1 bungalow, which are near the site's north boundary. So the bungalow is to the right and the semis are to the left. Parking to serve the development would be provided on the central area of the site, and this is detailed on the updates. The application seeks to overcome objections to a previous scheme on this site, which was for a detached building of a much larger scale than the scheme before you. Next slide, please. Here you can see some site photos. The photos on your left-hand side show the central area of the application site, and the photo on the right-hand side shows Queen Anne House building, as you can see from Bridge Road. Next slide, please. The applicant has demonstrated that the loss of office space will not be detrimental to the local economy, and as the site lies within a defined settlement, the proposal is considered acceptable in principle. Here you can see the proposed elevations of Queen Anne House. The listed building consent deals with the internal works, and the external alterations to the building, which would comprise removing a rear canopy, replacing 1 window in the rear elevation, and removing its existing signage, would be considered minor in nature. Next slide, please. Here you can see the elevations for the proposed dwellings. So Unit 6 is the detached dwelling facing Bridge Road, the one that would be located near Queen Anne House. Unit 7 and 8 are a pair of semis facing Station Road, and Unit 9 is a bungalow. Next slide, please. Here you can see the proposal perspective plans showing Bridge Road and Station Road street scenes. The development would provide an acceptable building line to address both streets, and the plots are considered to respond well to their varied surrounding context. Unit 6, which you can see on the left-hand side, would be located closer to Queen Anne House, and it takes its design cues from the listed building and would be in keeping with its style. The properties along Station Road, which you can see on the right-hand side, are considered to be well designed with good material, scale, and proportion. The dwellings would retain generous space around themselves, and so the proposed quantum of development is considered to be comfortably accommodated within the site. The proposal would be provided with soft landscaping, and this could be secured by planning condition. It is also noted that both applications benefit from support of the Conservation Officer, and the development positively contributes to the curtilage of the listed building and wider street scene. The proposal would be acceptable in terms of its impact on the residential amenities of both adjoining neighbours and its future occupiers. The development would be provided with 16 parking spaces, which be in accordance with the current standards, and would also allow free visitor spaces to be provided. Next slide, please. And here you can see some aerial views of the proposed development, which is recommended for approval, subject to the planning conditions detailed in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor White, you called this application in. Would you like to, or do you wish to inform the committee why you called it in, please?
All right. Originally, I called it in because I felt that the extra housing on the site was overdevelopment of the site and loss again of green space in Bagshot. Or other things that have come to my attention now is the access to the houses from Station Road. There's already a traffic problem on Station Road, and it looks from the pictures, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure the officer can correct me, is that the bin collections will be from Station Road as well. Obviously, the residents on Station Road are not too happy with this. On the original, the first slide that you showed the boundary showing that it was cutting into County Council boundary. And that caused concern as well, because a year or two ago, the whole site was cleared of the trees and the shrubs, and there was a rather long argument to keep the oak tree. Now, if that boundary is correct, they're showing that the oak tree may be removed, but I need confirmation that the boundary is not encroaching onto the county council land, which is a narrow strip which has quite a few trees on it. In a recent document, our burial officer advised that significant trees would be TPO'd. They don't seem to be mentioned in this document. If they are, I'm sorry I've missed them, but there are quite a few trees that are significant and I feel should be TPO'd. I'll stop there for the moment.
Thank you. Do you want to come back on? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In respect of the bin collection, the bins for units 7, 8 and 9, which is the pair of semis and bungalow, would be collected from Station Road, and the bins for the flats would be collected from Bridge Road. In terms of the site boundary, they have served notice on county highways, so from a planning perspective, we are satisfied that the red line includes land that's not within their ownership, but then that's a matter in between the applicant and the county to take forward. I am not aware of any TPOs being placed on site.
But they were the trees were on county land, so they're not within the red line, are they?
Trees are on county land, and therefore I didn't understand what you said about the border being county land, so that's between the developer and county. Surely they can only show they're developing on their own land and not on county as well, or have I got that wrong?
Unfortunately, yes, you don't need to have ownership of a site to put in a planning application. And on the tree element,
Yeah, also on the tree elements, obviously, if the trees are on county land, we wouldn't impose a TPO on trees which are controlled by county. Now, the plans I've seen do indicate that the canopy of the oak is protected, and it seems certainly to be something. There was an arboricultural report submitted with the planning application as well, and it appears that those issues have been taken fully into account.
Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chair. Not wishing to go over the same question we always ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway. There are 9 buildings and there are 9 spaces, of which there are a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, two 1-bedrooms, a 4-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 1-bedroom. That sounds like an awful lot of rooms with not many spaces. And I know we have this conversation every time, but every time we need to bring it up. That 9 spaces, that's 1 space per dwelling, doesn't seem as if it's correct. Can you just clarify that's correct?
If you go to page 5 of the updates, you can see that the recommended provision only requires them to provide 11 spaces to serve the residential units on site, and they're actually providing 13. So, and the free spaces would remain available for visitor parking, because in total they have 16 on site.
Okay, fair enough. It still seems like quite, but it's obviously a lot. It's a lot more. So I missed out on that. Sorry, I apologise.
Good question. Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you. Just going back to some of the points that were made earlier about the TPOs on our planning website, there is a very clear indication of a chestnut, a fir, a cedar, and a home oak that is actually identified. I just wondered what the committee's opinion was about making sure that we put in a stipulation that no close board fencing should be allowed on this site. So that's on the basis that at the moment, this does give quite a nice view as you come into Bagshot. It's quite an open view. There's a lot of effort that has been put in by the planning officers to ensure that there is green planting in terms of the laurel hedge, the limes, and everything that is identified on that document. But there is at the moment nothing to stop. And the reason that's prompted this is a local development that has done as we've requested in terms of openness and making somewhere look green and pleasant, which it does from the inside of the site. And then they've shoved a close board fence all the way around it, which given its green belt doesn't look too good. So I wondered whether it is possible to add an additional condition that no close board fencing above a slightly reduced height would be acceptable on this, and whether or not it's possible to do that. Because as I said, we've gone to a lot of effort, and obviously the officers have gone to a lot of negotiation to do their best to get a nice green hedge around it, but there is no guarantee that we'll actually be able to see that. I do share some concerns about parking, but as we will be told, it's within Surrey County Council's parking recommendations, and actually they have got 9 spaces for 5 units, which actually isn't too bad by a lot of the things that come forward. But if we could have that, then I think I would be slightly happier about it. It's a pity. I think you lose the impact of that building, but if the conservation officer isn't bothered by it, we haven't really got anywhere to go with it.
Conditional informative.
Thank you. We do have put a condition 4, which requires them to provide a landscape plan, and also condition 6 on page 41. It does remove PD rights for the erection of fences on site, so we could control that by planning condition.
Sorry, Chairman, I come back. Can we condition that at this stage to actually make the informative that there should be no close board fencing around the outside of this?
Yeah. Yes. Councillor White.
Sorry, Chairman. It's just a comment, really. Residents in Bagshot are really happy that Queen Anne House is going back to residential, which what it was originally built for all those many years ago, and it would be nice to see that again. But I still think the site is being overdeveloped for such a small area.
Thank you. Councillor Deach. Sorry, Paul, you're muted.
Sorry, such a rookie mistake. I agree with Councillor White that I thought you might like that, Chairman. I agree with Councillor White that it's overdeveloped. It's a beautiful building, it really is, and I think that the density there actually will lessen the impact of that. But I do understand Councillor Wheeler's point that if the relevant officer's happy with it, we haven't got anywhere to go. I just wanted to agree with Councillor Garrett that in terms of parking, we should raise these issues every time. I know that the policies make it difficult for us, but there are people watching these live streams and the recordings afterwards, and they need to see that ward councillors actually share their concerns when it comes to parking provision or lack of. Even with the extra parking spaces in the additional report, I still think it's light. And actually, when you look at the bedrooms, the size of the bedrooms of some of the properties, you know, that it makes it even more light. And I think that with personal experience in Dettingen Park, where I live in Deepcut, I know they have this problem at the site next door to Waitrose in Bagshot, that visitor provision is woeful on this development, I think. And there's going to be some serious problems there. I really do. I'm all for converting this from office to residential. As Councillor White says, it's a beautiful building. It should go back to its original state. But, you know, there's going to be residents living there that are going to suffer impact, and neighbouring properties as well, where parking will spill out onto the neighbouring streets and so on. I would like to see this addressed, and I am going to have some difficulty in supporting this on behalf of residents in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question about units 7 and 8. I realise that they face onto Station Road, and the question has been asked about where the bins will be collected from. However, I look at the plan and it seems that their back gardens are divided from the driveway into the site that serves the bungalow at the back by a fence. Do we know if that fence will have permission to have a gate in it, so that those properties could have access into the site, in which case it is perfectly possible that they could put their bins with the other bins to be collected from the site, and therefore not clutter Station Road with the bins for collection during collection day.
I mean, in terms of the gate, we don't know at this stage, but again, that could be picked up by condition 4. And again, if you want an informative on that issue as well, we can raise that. I don't think actually you can insist that the bins go to the existing bin store, because there's probably a space issue there anyway.
Councillor Allaway.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I must apologise being fourth down the running on parking tonight. It's normally my favourite, but I do sympathise. Yeah, there's more parking spaces there than you would normally expect being provided for this type of development. And perhaps we've got to make that compromise. However, I would just say that could the potential turning space for any truck or vehicle that enters that site to be able to turn, because if there isn't enough spaces, then people will just park outside of the spaces, unless it's unregulated. It'll prevent trucks from being able to turn properly, faced with the alternative of reversing out, which is not good. And secondly, Unit 9, I would propose that planning conditions are applied to that unit, preventing further development to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, with respect to Unit 9, again, condition set 6 on page 41 does restrict permitted development rights for the whole development. So that would be picked up on there.
Yeah, and the turning space issue, that would have been looked at by highways, and obviously they had no objections in terms of the refuse vehicles coming in and the issue in terms of the turning situation on site as well. I can only default back to highways. I know you're laughing, but they're the experts, so we have to rely on their comments.
I have to say, you don't normally see refuse vehicles reversing out of sites, but now you're all going to tell me, oh yes they do, but I haven't seen one. Are there any other comments? If not, we have an officer recommendation on agenda item 20/0592 with an informative and an additional condition. Is there a proposer and a seconder?
Not an additional condition, because the condition's already there.
Sorry, condition's already in place. I beg your pardon, condition's already in place. So it's Councillor Tapper and Councillor Betton, and then Mr. Scott, please. You're not here to enjoy yourself.
Right. Voting on the officer's recommendation on 200592. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett. Sorry, Councillor Barnett, you're on mute.
Can you indicate, Councillor Barnett, because you're still mute? Are you? Is that you're in agreement? Thank you. We'll take that as an agreement. Thank you.
Councillor Cliff Besson.
Agreed.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Reluctantly agreed.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darren Ratteram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Sorry, I haven't changed my mind. Against.
So that is 14-1. That is carried 14 votes to 1. And now we go on to, I don't think we need to debate on the item, but there's Officer Report 20/0593 on the listed building consent.
I was going to say, do you want to just ask if any members have any
Do
comments on
any
it?
member wish to make any comments on that? If not, can I have a proposer and a seconder for this one? I'll go for Councillor Rise and Councillor White this time, and then Mr. Scott, please.
Voting on the officer recommendations on 20/0593. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Agreed.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
In favour.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Agreed.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darren Ratteram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
In favour.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
And Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Thank you, members. That is unanimous. On to item 4 on page 79, the Annex 6 Mount Pleasant Close Lightwater. On declarations, I think the applicant has written to all members of the committee. Are there any other declarations to make on this item? Councillor Barnett?
Yeah, in addition to the applicant writing to me, I've also had correspondence from objectors, and I also had my colleague Councillor Galliford visited the applicant on behalf of me because I'm in a very strict lockdown at the moment, and she's also briefed me about it.
Yeah, quite understand, and thank you very much, Councillor Barnett. Any other declarations? No. Thank you, and Ms. Teresa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The planning application at number 6 Mount Pleasant Close seeks consent to erect a 2-story three-bed semi-detached dwelling with associated access, parking and rear garden. There are updates in respect of this item, and I would direct members to these. The application site, which you can see here outlined in red, lies within a residential area in Lightwater Village. On the same side of the road as the application site, the dwellings to the west are bungalows, and the properties to the east are 2-story dwellings linked by their garages. Directly opposite, there are 2-story dwelling houses. Next slide, please. The application follows 2 previously refused applications, both of which were subsequently dismissed at appeal. The block plan for the 2016 application, which you can see on the left-hand side, was for the erection of a detached dwelling, and it was considered that the proposal had limited gaps to its side boundaries, which created a cramped appearance and failed to respect the pattern of space in the road. This would be exacerbated by opening up the plot's frontage to accommodate parking. The 2017 application, which is shown in the middle, was for a detached dwelling, which was considered to result in a visually cramped development that did not respect the spaciousness of the road. The inspector further noted that the plot would be significantly narrower than those other plots in the immediate locality, sorry, and the loss of the front boundary treatment would add to the visual harm resulting from the proposal. On the right-hand side, you can see the block plan for a 2-story extension, which has been granted recently. The access arrangements would, however, remain unchanged as a result of this proposal. Next slide, please. Here you can see the front elevations for the previous schemes. Although the current proposal would have a similar appearance to the approved extension, which is shown on the right-hand side, the opening up of the site's frontage means that the proposal's effect on the street scene would be materially different, as noted by the inspector in the 2018 appeal decision. Next slide, please. The width of the plot has been increased by about ½ meter, which is not considered to be materially different from the previously dismissed appeals, and it remains that the proposed plot subdivision would be out of keeping with its context. In addition, the proposal would introduce the semi-detached dwelling, which would appear at odds with the character of the road. The laying of the driveway and removal of front boundary treatment would result in a frontage similar to the previous applications, and therefore an objection to the proposal is raised on these grounds. The development is considered acceptable in terms of its impact on residential amenity and highway safety. However, this would not outweigh the harm identified character, and it is recommended for refusal. Next slide, please. Here you can see a site photo showing the front of the application site to the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, on the top, it's a view of Mount Pleasant Close facing towards the east. And on the bottom, you can see where the proposal would be located, which is above the garage, and the greenery that would be lost to accommodate the development. Thank you.
Udo?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Members. Councillor Barnett.
Unmute myself. Yeah, I'd just like to give the appellants, the applicants, take on some of the things that the planning officer was saying there. Particularly, he was puzzled, I think he said, of the comparisons between the two previous applications, both of which were involving building a separate sort of detached extension or annex, I think I should say. And when you look at the photographs, there is no question that they did look very, very odd in as much as they were very narrow and tall. And what he's done in this instance is suggested the building of or turning the whole building really into a semi-detached, or instead of having a detached extension, it was going to be, an extension to make a semi-detached thing. The result of this meaning that the overall width is significantly larger. And again, if you look at the photograph of the proposed new building, it doesn't look anything like as odd as before. And I would disagree that it was out of character. It looks, provided it's built with the same materials and appearance and so on, it would look perfectly good. He also pointed out that further down the road there are semi-detached houses, so it's not out of as much character as they're suggesting. My main concern with the overall development is what has been pointed out, that it would involve building a brand new drive which ploughs straight through a nice tree and a load of shrubbery, and that certainly would make a difference. But then again, you can again look at some of the surrounding houses where you've got these awful gardens where there's nothing except a load of concrete or tarmac and so on. I don't know whether there would be any possibility of suggesting putting in a condition that the applicant added more shrubbery and trees or what have you in the other part of the garden or in the back, whether that would alleviate it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bonnet. Are there any other comments, members? Councillor Tapper.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've considered this particular application in considerable depth and made my own investigations as to whether I believe that the arguments to refuse this application carry any substantial weight. I have to say that, in my opinion, most of the objections are nitpicking. There certainly is no overall standard style or type for the houses in this road. There are a mishmash of different styles and sizes, detached, semi-detached, bungalows, full-size houses, houses with rooms in roof. So there is no consistent style here to be observed, and this particular application, in my opinion, does not fall into the category of something which stands out like a sore thumb. I believe it's been very well designed, and I think it will blend very nicely into this particular environment. The arguments about limiting the width of the plot on which it is to be built being out of character is also being demonstrated not to be true. That there is another property, two properties on the opposite side of the road. Whether these are two detached properties or a single property with the same dimensions is, in my opinion, totally irrelevant. So I am totally unconvinced by the arguments, I have to say here, and I will definitely be voting against the recommendation to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wheeler.
I just wanted to check that there hadn't been any great planning changes since the appeals that went through and decided against this application by a higher authority than us that I might have missed, whereby we should disregard them. If the officers could just confirm that.
Sorry, there's not been any other decisions beyond the appeal decisions.
But there's not been any great change in planning legislation either, no. So there's nothing really that's changed from the decision at those appeals.
No.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Councillor Dugan.
And just to ask the officers to confirm that there have been two planning appeals dismissed by the inspector with no great change in any policy. Would that be correct?
Yes.
That was a yes.
Some interesting observations by fellow members then, really.
Thank you for that. Any other comments by members? There we have an officer recommendation to refuse. Is there a proposer and a seconder for that? Councillor Dugan, Councillor Garrett. Sorry, Councillor Whitcroft, you were too slow. Mr. Scott, I see you.
So members, you're voting on the officer recommendation to refuse. Councillor Graham Alloway.
Agreed.
Councillor Peter Barnett.
Against.
Councillor Cliff Betton.
Against.
Councillor Paul Deach.
Agreed to the refusal.
Councillor Colin Dugan.
Agreed.
Councillor Sean Garrett.
Agreed.
Councillor Edward Hawkins.
Agreed.
Councillor David Lewis.
Agreed.
Councillor Charlotte Morley.
Agreed.
Councillor Darrell Retram.
Agreed.
Councillor Morgan Rise.
Agreed.
Councillor Graham Tapper.
Against.
Councillor Victoria Wheeler.
Agreed.
Councillor Helen Whitcroft.
Agreed.
Councillor Valerie White.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you, members. That has carried 12 votes to 3. Thank you very much indeed, members. Thank you, members of the public, and thank you, officers. That's the end of tonight's meeting, I think. Yes. The date of the next meeting is 25th of December. No, sorry, I can't read my own writing. It's the 17th of December. It might feel like the 25th. It's the 17th of December. So all I can say is thank you very much and good night, and please everybody stay safe. And thank you one and all.
Thank you.